After Troy, Odysseus thought warfare's greatest danger had ended. But his voyage home became deadlier than war itself. His exhausted crew survived storm hunger and starless seas. Then they found an island without roads or voices. Goats roamed freely, promising food to the starving sailor. Odysseus noticed smoke, proving something powerful lived somewhere nearby. He chose 12 men while others guarded the ships. They climbed inland carrying weapons, supplies, and precious wine. Soon, enormous footprints appeared beside their tiny human tracks. The tracks led toward a cave swallowing temple-sized darkness. Several men urged retreat, but Odysseus remained dangerously curious. Inside, everything was built for hands larger than theirs. Massive shelves overflowed with cheese milk and stored food. The crew begged Odysseus to steal supplies and escape. He refused, expecting the owner to offer proper hospitality. At sunset, heavy footsteps shook dust from the ceiling. Polyphemus entered, one-eyed and stronger than many men combined. Sailors hid while the monster drove his flock inside. He sealed the entrance with an impossibly massive boulder. Firelight exposed the strangers, narrowing his single eye suspiciously. Odysseus invoked sacred hospitality and introduced them as travelers. Polyphemus laughed, fearing neither gods nor mortal customs ever. Then he asked where their ship waited along shore. Odysseus recognized the trap before answering that dangerous question. He claimed their vessel had shattered against island rocks. Polyphemus seized 2 sailors and killed them with ease. Afterward, he slept while survivors struggled against overwhelming panic. Odysseus considered attacking the sleeping giant with his sword. Then he realized death would trap them behind stone. They needed Polyphemus alive, blinded, confused, and opening exits. At dawn, Polyphemus moved the boulder and released sheep. The Greeks rushward, but his arm blocked escape. He touched each sheep before sealing the cave again. Darkness returned, leaving one day to invent survival somehow. Odysseus discovered an enormous olive wood club near the wall. Together, they cut one section and shaped a stake. They sharpened one end until it resembled a spear. Then fire hardened the point against breaking or splintering. They hid the weapon beneath filthy straw and dung. 4 sailors were chosen, though everyone shared equal danger. Next, Odysseus prepared concentrated wine, his strongest hidden weapon. 1 cup normally required 20 cups of water beforehand. At sunset, Polyphemus returned and sealed them inside again. Before more violence, Odysseus offered the Cyclops mysterious wine. The flavor delighted him, and he demanded another bowl. Odysseus served repeatedly, hiding fear behind obedient movements carefully. Soon the giant staggered, and his eyelid became heavy. Before sleeping, Polyphemus demanded the stranger's real personal name. "My name is Nobody," Odysseus said, fooling the Cyclops. Polyphemus promised to eat nobody last as generous hospitality. Moments later, the monster collapsed, snoring loudly like thunder. Odysseus signaled, and chosen sailors uncovered their hidden stake. They heated the point until olive wood glowed within flames. Then they approached the sleeping eye with measured silence. Odysseus aimed carefully while others prepared to strike together. Together they blinded the eye, controlling their stone prison. Polyphemus awoke roaring strongly enough to shake the mountain. Blinded and furious, he swept enormous hands throughout darkness. The Greeks scattered into cracks too narrow for fingers. His cries summoned neighboring Cyclops across the moonlit island. From outside, they asked who attacked him during night. Polyphemus screamed nobody was killing him through deceptive trickery. The others assumed illness and left him suffering alone. The false name transformed his warning into meaningless nonsense. But dawn arrived, and Polyphemus still guarded the exit. He opened the cave, then blocked the doorway himself. Again, he felt every sheep's back before release carefully. Odysseus studied the flock and found their final shelter. They quietly tied the animals into groups of 3. Each sailor fastened beneath the middle sheep's thick belly. Odysseus selected Polyphemus's largest and most treasured ram carefully. He clung underneath, trusting strength and the ram's patience. The first sheep approached while every hidden sailor froze. Polyphemus checked their backs, never touching shadows underneath them. One by one, the prisoners passed beneath his hands. Finally, the largest ram stopped beside its injured master. Polyphemus wondered why his favorite ram departed last today. Only thick wool separated Odysseus from his searching hand. Then the ram carried Odysseus into bright open sunlight. They drove the flock toward shore for needed supplies. The waiting crew rejoiced when survivors finally returned safely. They loaded sheep quickly while Polyphemus searched nearby hills. Oars struck water, pulling them beyond his enormous reach. Polyphemus reached shore, following sounds from the escaping ship. He tore up a boulder and aimed toward voices. The stone landed behind, pushing their ship dangerously backward. The crew begged Odysseus remain silent until reaching safety. But pride overcame caution, and Odysseus shouted toward Polyphemus. He declared a warrior, not coward, had blinded him. His sailors pleaded that he reveal nothing more whatsoever. Odysseus ignored them, announcing name, homeland, and father proudly. Polyphemus remembered prophecy naming the man who blinded him. He raised his face and called upon Father Poseidon. He begged Poseidon prevent Odysseus from ever reaching home. If home remained possible, make the journey painfully long. Then Polyphemus hurled one final stone toward his voice. It struck ahead and waves drove the ship outward. The island vanished, but its curse crossed the water. Odysseus knew intelligence saved them, while pride endangered everyone. Strength alone would have trapped the Greeks behind stone. Direct battle would transform courage into useless, deadly sacrifice. The wine weakened Polyphemus without exposing their secret strategy. The name nobody prevented help when Polyphemus called desperately. The sheep transformed careful searching into an escape route. But boasting transformed perfect victory into divine hostility afterward. Poseidon's anger followed Odysseus through every remaining voyage chapter. More monsters, storms, temptations, and losses blocked homeward passage. In Ithaca, Penelope waited without knowing Poseidon's terrible curse. Telemachus grew older while each year erased hopeful certainty. Odysseus watched stars, believing intelligence could guide him home. But the sea belonged to a god knowing him. Generations repeated this story because danger extended beyond monsters. Odysseus contained both patient strategist and reckless victor within. His greatest gift saved lives, weakness prolonged their suffering. Polyphemus lost sight, Odysseus briefly lost necessary restraint himself. The ram remained, silently witnessing their impossible escape afterward. The cave preserved evidence of strategy built under terror. Waves erased footprints, but they never erased Poseidon's curse. Odysseus defeated strength by thinking differently from his enemy. Yet his true ordeal began when pride revealed identity. Long before legends, prophecy terrified ancient Argos completely. King Acrisius learned his grandson would someday kill him. To escape fate, he imprisoned him inside a tower. Soon, Danae held Perseus and became panicked. Acrisius avoided murder, choosing the cold, dangerous sea instead. Danae and Perseus drifted inside darkness through violent waves. For days, the ocean carried them beyond familiar maps. Fisherman Dictys discovered their chest beside Seriphos at sunrise. Perseus grew among fishermen, learning strength without royal privilege. He became brave, loyal, and quick to defend others. Polydex desired Danae and quietly hated her protective son. The king cleverly hid a deadly challenge inside celebration. Mockery pushed young Perseus toward one reckless, proud promise. Perseus vowed to return, carrying Medusa's deadly severed head. One direct glance from Medusa could petrify living victims. Polydex accepted, convinced this impossible quest would kill Perseus. Perseus had courage, but courage alone could never succeed. Hermes appeared beside the restless sea in silver light. Athena joined him, bringing wisdom and disciplined warfare skills. Athena presented Perseus a brilliantly polished bronze reflective shield. He would fight through reflections, never meeting Medusa's gaze. Hermes offered a curved blade capable of cutting immortals. First, Perseus needed to locate the mysterious ancient Graeae. 3 ancient Graeae sisters shared one glowing eye together. Perseus waited until none of the sisters could see. Then he seized their eye between 2 waiting hands. He withheld their sight until they revealed the path. Finally, they described a hidden valley beyond northern mountains. Beyond icy peaks, Perseus discovered a secret green valley. The nymphs welcomed him, already understanding his dangerous purpose. They gave Perseus winged sandals for traveling through air. They offered Hades' helmet, making its wearer completely invisible. Finally, a magical bag could safely contain Medusa's head. Perseus practiced flying low before trusting the open sky. He tested invisibility until even nymphs lost sight completely. Athena warned preparation separates true bravery from reckless suicide. At dawn, Perseus flew westward following the gods' directions. A jagged island emerged beneath thick and threatening fog. Its shore held statues that once were living men. 3 Gorgon sisters slept inside ruins, only Medusa mortal. Even sleeping, Medusas twisted and tasted the air. Perseus lowered the helmet and vanished across temple stones. He moved slowly because sound could reveal invisible footsteps. His eyes remained fixed upon the shield's reversed reflection. One serpent sensed warmth where no visible body stood. Perseus stopped breathing, becoming still among surrounding statues silently. With each step, Medusa's reflection grew increasingly larger nearby. Then one golden eye opened inside the shield's reflection. Medusa awoke, but invisibility still concealed the approaching hero. Perseus circled silently, refusing every instinct to look directly. Her gaze swept the chamber, petrifying anything moving nearby. When Medusa turned, Perseus entered the final striking range. Watching only reflections, Perseus swung one decisive curved arc. The blow ended Medusa, but her deadly power remained. From that impossible moment, winged Pegasus suddenly appeared alive. Perseus guided Medusa's head safely inside the magical bag. Her immortal sisters awakened, screaming across the entire island. Still invisible, Perseus fled while claws struck empty space. Winged sandals lifted him upward through the shattered roof. The Gorgons followed, guided by scent, sound, and grief. Perseus flew between cliffs, letting fog conceal his direction. He dropped stones below, creating false splashes across water. The sisters attacked splashes while Perseus climbed above clouds. Only after escaping completely did Perseus remove the helmet. On distant shores, Perseus encountered Atlas guarding golden fruit. Atlas feared prophecy and denied the exhausted hero shelter. Insultius offered proud Atlas one final clear warning. When Atlas attacked, Medusa's gaze turned him into stone. Perseus crossed violent storms toward the kingdom of Ethiopia. There, Andromeda stood chained beside the raging coastal sea. Her kingdom had offered Andromeda to a terrible monster. Her mother's pride offended sea gods, bringing terrible punishment. Now a sea creature rose to claim the princess. Perseus could flee, but heroism rejected the easiest path. He cut Andromeda's chains and ordered her upward immediately. Then Perseus launched forward as the monster broke through. The creature snapped, throwing enormous walls of water skyward. Perseus attacked overhead, but armor deflected his blade harmlessly. Its sweeping tail shattered stone where Perseus had hovered. Realizing strength failed, Perseus reached for Medusa's final weapon. Behind his shield, Perseus carefully opened the dangerous bag. The monster looked once, then hardened completely into stone. Its stone body crashed down, ending Ethiopia's terror forever. Andromeda saw a warrior who courageously chose to. The grateful kingdom welcomed Perseus as savior and guest. Afterward, Andromeda joined Perseus on his journey towards Seriphos. Across the sea, Perseus carried victory, love, and danger. Meanwhile, Polydectes became crueler, forcing Danae into hiding. Dictys protected Danae while soldiers surrounded the sacred sanctuary. Perseus entered the palace before anyone believed he survived. Polydectes laughed and demanded proof of the promised gift. Perseus warned innocents to turn away and close eyes. The arrogant king and followers refused, expecting empty bluff. Medusa's gaze crossed the hall, turning cruelty into stone. Within moments, the tyrant's power ended without further violence. Danae embraced Perseus, finally safe from her relentless persecutor. Perseus crowned Dictys, rewarding the fishermen who saved them. He returned divine tools, keeping only what wisdom permitted. Perseus offered Medusa's head to Athena inside her temple. Athena placed the terrifying face upon her protective shield. Perseus traveled toward Argos, unaware prophecy still waited there. Acrisius heard Perseus lived and fled before his arrival. Later, Perseus joined peaceful games in a neighboring kingdom. He threw the discus skillfully, intending harm to nobody. Sudden wind carried it toward an unknown elderly spectator. The spectator was Odysseus, fulfilling prophecy through tragic accident. Perseus mourned the grandfather who spent life escaping fate. Burdened by grief, he used Argos' tragedy-born throne completely. Instead, Perseus founded Mycenae beyond the reach of fear. With Andromeda, he built a family-shaping heroic legend. His greatest victories came through preparation, wisdom, and restraint. He survived Medusa by knowing when never to look. He escaped Gorgons because he practiced before trusting magic. He controlled Medusa's power by respecting its lasting danger. He became heroic by risking everything for a stranger. Medusa's victims warned against fear, arrogance, and careless sight. The heavens preserved Perseus and companions within eternal constellations. Perseus, Andromeda, and Pegasus became stars together forever. The abandoned child became a hero defeating impossible dangers. His legend endured because true courage always begins wisely.
On the island of Crete, beneath a golden sunrise, a new tragedy quietly began. Hidden inside the palace, where freedom felt more distant than the horizon. One was Daedalus, the brilliant inventor who had built wonders for kings. The other was his son, Icarus, and hungry for the world outside. Their prison was not a cell of iron, but a high stone workshop under watch. Icarus stared through a narrow window and watched birds drift freely across the sea. Daedalus understood a cruel truth: King Minos would never let them leave alive. The king had once praised Daedalus when it knew too many secrets. After the labyrinth and its horrors, Daedalus himself proved his own genius. Night after night, father and sat in silence, listening to the sea they could not. Icarus could not bear it much longer, youth captivity into a fire inside the chest. There must be a way out, he insisted, refusing to believe that stone walls had won. Daedalus said nothing at first, but his eyes followed the birds beyond the tower. Birds crossed the sky without permission, without maps, and without fear. Then the answer arrived not through strength, but through observation. If the sea was guarded and the roads were sealed, then only the sky remained. Icarus watched his father gather feathers and felt hope flicker for the first time. Daedalus sorted the feathers carefully, to the smallest, like pieces of a puzzle. He melted wax over a tiny flame and prepared to shape a miracle. String, wood, and wax came the bones of something impossible. Side by side, father and son worked in secrecy, building hope feather by feather. The king's guards remained careless, never imagining escape could come from above. Slowly, two enormous wings began to take shape across the dusty workshop. To Icarus, they looked less like tools and more like a dream-taking form. But Daedalus knew dreams were delicate, and mistakes in the sky would not be forgiven. He built straps to hold the wings firmly to the shoulders and arms. Icarus laughed as he tried one wing, already imagining the world below him. Daedalus warned him not to play, because the sky punishes carelessness more cruelly than earth. Long after midnight, while Crete slept, the wings grew closer to completion. At dawn, two pairs of wings stood ready against the wall like captured pieces of heaven. Icarus stared at them in disbelief, as if freedom itself had entered the room. Daedalus moved carefully, treating each strap and knot like a lifeline. He taught Icarus how to move his arms slowly, steadily, and with balance. Icarus copied every motion, though excitement made patience difficult. Then came the warning that would decide everything. "Do not fly too low," Daedalus said, "or the sea will soak your wings. And do not fly too high, or the sun will melt the wax. Follow me, stay in the middle, and trust the path I choose." Icarus nodded, but inside him, wonder was already louder than caution. At first light, they climbed to the highest edge of the tower. The world stretched below them, cliffs, waves, and a kingdom that believed them trapped. Daedalus tightened every strap on his son's wings with trembling hands. Icarus smiled, fearless in the way only the young can be. Daedalus stepped into the air first, and for one breath the world held still. Then the wings held, and he glided above the sea like a living bird. Icarus leaped after him, heart-pounding, leaving prison behind in a single bound. For a terrifying moment he dropped, then the wings caught the wind. Suddenly, father and son were flying together above the shining sea. Far below, the palace guards looked up in disbelief and shouted in panic. Even King Minos could only stare as his prisoners escaped the impossible way. The sky opened around them, vast, clean, and freedom tasted brighter than sunlight. Icarus laughed in pure joy, overwhelmed by the thrill of flight. Daedalus flew ahead, but kept turning to check on his son. Beneath them, fish flashed in the water like silver sparks. Seabirds wheeled around them, as if puzzled by these strange feathered men. The more Icarus flew, the more confident he became. His father signaled for him to stay close and keep to the middle sky. Icarus nodded again, but the temptation of height had already begun. Above him, the sunlight looked warm, endless, and inviting. It no longer felt like danger. It felt like destiny. He pulled his wings harder and began to rise. Daedalus saw him climbing and called out in sudden fear. But Icarus only smiled and climbed higher, drunk on wonder. Soon clouds drifted between them, and distance turned guidance into echoes. Above the clouds, the world felt unreal, as if he had entered a dream. Then the wax began to shine strangely under the growing heat. One feather slipped loose and spun into the air. Icarus looked back, surprised, but still did not understand. Then another feather fell, and then another. And far below, Daedalus shouted for him to descend immediately. Panic arrived too late, and Icarus beat his wings harder. The sun answered with silence as warm wax dripped from the feathers. The beautiful wings began to collapse under him. In one awful moment, joy turned into terror. Icarus fell through the sky, surrounded by the feathers of his broken dream. Daedalus plunged after him, reaching through empty air. The sea rushed upward, cold and merciless beneath the falling boy. Feathers spiraled around him like pieces of a promise undone. For an instant, his face held fierce shock and the last fading light of wonder. Then Icarus struck the sea, and the sky went silent. Daedalus circled desperately above the waves, calling his son's name. Only feathers floated back to him, rocking gently on the water. At last he landed on a barren shore, carrying grief heavier than stone. The inventor who had conquered the sky now knelt helpless before the sea. Sunset painted the waves gold, but no beauty could soften the loss. Daedalus gathered the scattered feathers as if he could gather time itself. He honored the place where the sea had taken Icarus from him. In later years, people would remember those waters by the name of Icarus. Daedalus continued onward alone, carrying broken wings and a broken heart. Yet memory stayed alive, the laughter hoped the impossible first flight. He remembered the lessons, the warnings, and the love behind every word. The sun had not been evil, it had merely remained what it always was. The danger had come from a different force, the hunger to rise beyond wisdom. Icarus wanted more than escape. He wanted greatness, wonder, and the impossible. That is why his fall still haunts the world, because it began with a dream. Daedalus gazed across the horizon and understood that genius cannot protect every heart. Between the sea below and the sun above, survival had always lived in balance. But ordinary choices often preserve extraordinary lives. The broken wings remain proof that brilliance without restraint can become tragedy. Soon the tale spread from shore to shore, told by sailors, traders, and poets. They spoke of the boy who flew higher than any mortal should. Some remembered his courage more than his mistake. Others remembered the warning he ignored and the price he paid. But everyone remembered the image of a feather drifting beneath the sun. Daedalus lived on, but the sky would never feel the same again. Every bright morning carried both triumph and sorrow in equal measure. For every parent, the story carried another pain the moment guidance is no longer enough. For every young dreamer, it carried a challenge to chase wonder without abandoning wisdom. Even now, the sea seems to whisper his name when the wind grows quiet. Some say the sky still remembers the shape of his flight. He flew too close to the sun, but also closer to immortality through story. His journey lasted only moments, yet its lesson survived for centuries. A single feather can lift a dream, or mark where one was lost. Daedalus released one feather to the wind as if letting his son fly once more. It rose briefly above the water, dancing in the fading light. In that quiet hour, grief and beauty shared the same horizon. The myth endures because every human heart knows the temptation to go too far. It also reminds us that wisdom is not weakness, it is the art of returning alive. Icarus fell, yet his name rose higher than kings, prisons, or fear. And so the boy who flew too close to the sea became a warning and a legend forever.
Some places allow one mistake, then never offer a return. Deep beneath ancient Crete, cold corridors swallowed every sound. One sandal was missing and red thread lay beside him. His fading torch made the surrounding darkness feel even deeper. Then two crimson eyes slowly opened beyond the distant archway. Heavy hooves struck stone, growing louder with every breath. The traveler rose and ran through identical twisting corridors. This was no ordinary maze built for careless visitors. It was the labyrinth beneath the great palace of Knossos. Daedalus created it under the command of King Minos. Inside, every passage seemed to move behind the trapped traveler. At its center lived the Minotaur, half man, half bull. Its strength was terrible, and its hunger never truly ended. For years, young Athenians entered the maze as unwilling sacrifices. Their families watched helplessly, because nobody had ever returned. Then Prince Theseus stepped forward and challenged the ancient terror. He promised to enter willingly and destroy the Minotaur forever. His father begged him to stay, but Theseus refused. Wearing a red cloak, he sailed across the Aegean Sea. At Crete, he faced the labyrinth's enormous black entrance. That night, Princess Ariadne secretly came to meet him. She placed a coil of red thread in his hands. "Bind it at the entrance," she whispered, "and never release it. Darkness may deceive you, but this thread remembers home." Theseus tied the thread tightly around a massive stone column. Inside a maze, one good knot can preserve a life. He tested it twice before crossing the first shadowed doorway. The thread unwound behind him, forming a narrow path of hope, but the labyrinth was designed to destroy both plans and courage. Sharp stones could catch the thread and cut it suddenly. So Theseus moved slowly, keeping it near the wall. He wrapped it around obstacles, preserving direction and steady tension. At each junction, he scratched arrows into the stone. Inside the labyrinth, even tiny tools could save him. When corridors looked identical, Theseus trusted more than sight. He felt the air and carefully watched his torch flame. A leaning flame revealed drafts moving through hidden openings. He tossed pebbles forward, testing pits and empty chambers. Sometimes he pressed his ear against the freezing walls. Echoes carried dripping water, falling stones, and distant breathing. Then a mighty roar shook dust. The Minotaur had caught the scent of a stranger. Theseus lowered his torch and hid behind a broken corner. Fighting inside that narrow corridor would mean certain death. The creature heard clearly, smelled fear, and shattered solid stone. To survive, Theseus would make the maze fight for him. He moved silently between pillars, ruins, and shadowed openings. Broken statues and black stains became landmarks in memory. When his torch weakened, he replaced the burning cloth. He drank carefully, saving water and strength for later. Panic made lost people run until their light vanished. Theseus slowed his breathing and kept his thoughts steady. An unusual draft led toward a chamber with many openings. Fresh air strengthened the flame and cleared his breathing. One sealed passage weakened both the fire and his chest. Theseus avoided it and followed the cleaner current downward. There he discovered an underground stream beneath low stone. Water might lead outside or deeper into a grave. He studied its direction before crossing an ancient wooden ladder. Every cracked stone was tested carefully with his spear. A hidden floor collapsed into darkness directly before him. Because he tested first, Theseus remained safely above the pit. Across the stream, heavy hoofprints covered the dusty ground. Animal smells and scratched walls revealed the Minotaur's territory. Theseus dimmed his torch and drew his bronze sword. In its reflection, two red eyes watched from behind. He refused to attack because surprise remained his greatest weapon. Instead, he threw a stone into the opposite passage. The sharp echo immediately drew the Minotaur away. Theseus slipped behind it and hurried through another corridor, but the monster turned and smashed through the separating wall. Stone exploded outward as its roar shook everything nearby. Theseus used pillars as shields and ran in zigzags. Whenever it accelerated, he changed direction at the final moment. One horn passed close enough to tear his cloak. The creature slipped and crashed violently into a stone column. Theseus recognized the weakness inside its enormous strength. Anger made the Minotaur powerful, but also dangerously predictable. On the dusty floor, Theseus mapped the nearby passages. He selected a narrow route beside a cracked supporting pillar. Then he entered the firelight, displaying his torn red cloak. The Minotaur bellowed and charged directly toward the prince. Theseus ran through a doorway and around the damaged column. He stayed visible, yet always beyond the creature's reach. At the last second, Theseus rolled across the floor. The Minotaur's horns buried deeply inside the weakened pillar. Theseus wrapped an old iron chain around the support. He pulled hard, then cut through the rusted fastener. A massive collapse separated him from the furious monster. Yet the Minotaur broke through and the chase continued. Theseus crossed a deep gap using a hanging chain. He tested every link and carefully balanced his weight. Below, the Minotaur found another path through the darkness. He squeezed through a tunnel covered with ancient spiderwebs. Strong wind touched his cloak, promising open space ahead, but the opening led directly into the labyrinth's center. An ancient hall rose there, surrounded by towering pillars. Behind him, the Minotaur shattered rubble and entered. The final battle began beneath carvings of forgotten monsters. Theseus kept a pillar between himself and the horns. The creature circled wildly, searching for a clear attack. Suddenly it changed direction, and Theseus lost his footing. His sword flew away as claws struck the floor. He rolled beneath the attack and recovered his weapon. Then Theseus climbed higher and waited for one final charge. The Minotaur lowered its head and thundered toward him. Theseus leaped aside, and both horns pierced cracked stone. The trapped creature struggled, but the pillar held firm. Theseus climbed its back and tightened rope around its neck. Every violent movement pulled the rope tighter around it. Theseus struck beneath its shoulder with his remaining strength. One final roar crossed the maze, then disappeared forever. But victory meant nothing unless Theseus escaped the labyrinth. He found Ariadne's thread and patiently followed it backward. Moonlight finally appeared beyond the last broken doorway. The surviving Athenians followed the red line into freedom. Ariadne waited outside, holding the thread's glowing end. Theseus defeated the monster, but the thread defeated the maze. From that night, Ariadne's thread became an eternal symbol.
Could one song convince death to release a beloved soul? In ancient Thrace, music seemed woven through the morning air. Orpheus was Thrace's greatest musician, captivating every crowd that listened. His golden lyre transformed simple sounds into something almost magical. Wild animals gathered peacefully whenever Orpheus played among the trees. Even ancient trees leaned closer, drawn toward every glowing note. Angry warriors lowered their weapons when his melody reached them. Then Orpheus met Eurydice, whose presence changed every future song. They exchanged shy smiles beside a river glowing at sunset. Beneath an olive tree, he played gentle music for Eurydice. Soon they married, believing happiness had finally chosen them both. During their wedding, a sacred flame suddenly weakened and died. Days later, a dark waited beneath flowers by riverside. Eurydice wandered through the meadow while Orpheus prepared another song. The hidden snakes struck quickly, changing their world forever afterward. Before help arrived, the poisons stole her strength and breath. Orpheus found her too late, surrounded only by terrible silence. He called her name repeatedly, but no answer ever returned. That evening, Thrace mourned while Orpheus stood apart from everyone. For once, the famous musician could not touch his lyre. His grief became a decision no living person had attempted. If death took Eurydice, Orpheus would demand her safe return. He found a black cave descending toward the dead's kingdom. Every descending step left sunlight, birds' wind, and warmth behind. Below, countless pale shadows waited beside a cold black river. These dead souls had lost memory, touch, and ordinary Charon immediately recognized that Orpheus was still alive and breathing. The boatman blocked passage and ordered the living musician away. Instead of arguing, Orpheus raised his lyre and began playing. The melody softened Charon's hardened expression beside the dark ferry. Charon carried a living man across the Styx that night. The black river moved silently, reflecting neither stars nor sky. Cerberus, the three-headed guardian, waited beyond the opposite river shore. Three snarling mouths surrounded Orpheus as he approached the gate. He played a lullaby, slower than a sleeping heart's rhythm. One by one, Cerberus' three heads lowered into peaceful sleep. Orpheus entered halls where every footstep returned as distant whispers. The Furies appeared, punishing guilty souls without mercy or Orpheus changed the song, filling it with regret, not fear. Even the Furies lowered their weapons and wept quietly together. At last, Orpheus faced Hades and the compassionate queen Persephone. Hades demanded why this living man entered his eternal kingdom. Orpheus offered no threats, he simply began his greatest song. The song recalled his first meeting with Eurydice beside water. It carried their wedding, laughter, and every peaceful morning together. Then his melody revealed the unbearable pain of losing her. Every soul fell silent and no shadow dared look away. Even Hades remembered every dead soul had once been loved. Persephone gently asked Hades to grant the grieving musician mercy. Hades agreed, but announced one unbreakable condition for their return. Eurydice would follow Orpheus upward toward the living world again. He must not look backward before both reached open sunlight. Behind him, Eurydice quietly emerged from the underworld's dark shadows. Orpheus climbed onward, unable to see the wife behind him. He heard faint footsteps, yet never dared to turn around. Eurydice followed silently, because dead souls were forbidden from speaking. Without her voice, certainty slowly surrendered to dangerous thoughts within. The underworld whispered that Hades had deceived the desperate musician. Eurydice stumbled behind him, releasing one frightened breath into darkness. His every instinct urged Orpheus to turn and help her immediately. Instead, he continued trusting Hades' promise above his growing fear. The spiral staircase seemed endless through the cold stone darkness. His weakening torch left only one red spark glowing nearby. Water echoed like footsteps, making every sound impossible to trust. Suddenly, every footstep behind Orpheus vanished into the darkness completely. Fear struck harder than Charon, Cerberus, or the Furies combined. Still facing forward, Orpheus softly whispered Eurydice's name into darkness. No answer came because the dead remained forbidden to speak. He wondered whether the gods had created one cruel illusion. Every whisper tempted him to confirm what love desperately needed. He gripped his lyre and continued upward without looking back. Finally, a thin line of daylight appeared beyond the passage. Fresh wind touched him, carrying scents of grass and rain. Eurydice remained behind, still surrounded by the underworld's deep shadow. Orpheus could not know how far she remained behind him. One careful step carried him fully into the living world. Warm sunlight touched his face, overwhelming every warning he remembered. Believing the trial finished, Orpheus turned to welcome Eurydice home. She still stood inside, reaching desperately toward the sunlight outside. For one heartbeat, their eyes met across the fatal threshold. Eurydice understood first. Hades' condition had already been broken forever. Darkness pulled her backward faster than Orpheus could reach her. Her fingers vanished, then her face, then every remaining light. Orpheus screamed her name as darkness swallowed Eurydice once more. He rushed back into the cave, desperate to repeat everything. Charon refused, keeping the distant ferry beyond Orpheus's reach forever. Cerberus guarded the closed gate, no longer calmed by music. Orpheus played desperately, yet the sealed gates never opened again. Death granted one exception and would never grant another chance. For 7 days, he refused food, sleep, and sunlight completely. At last, Orpheus returned alone beneath a gray, rainy sky. Animals followed silently, while even ancient trees seemed to mourn. He abandoned weddings, feasts, victories, and every royal celebration thereafter. Orpheus wandered Thrace, carrying one unbearable memory wherever he traveled. Every river reminded him where their love had first begun. Each sorrowful melody returned to the moment he looked backward. The hills repeated his sorrow across the entire silent land. He refused new love, remaining forever faithful to Eurydice alone. One night, a wild festival surrounded him within the forest. Revelers demanded joyful music, but Orpheus refused to pretend happiness. His refusal angered people who could not understand his grief. At first, thrown stones fell harmlessly beside his glowing music. Then drums and shouting overwhelmed the lyre's protective melody completely. When music vanished beneath noise, the lonely singer finally fell. His golden lyre floated gently downriver beneath the moonlight alone. The current carried his final music toward unseen distant shores. Death no longer frightened Orpheus as his soul descended peacefully. Beyond the gates, Eurydice waited where no condition divided them. This time, Orpheus reached her without fear, doubt, or hesitation. Together they walked, and he could finally watch her freely. The gods raised his golden lyre among the eternal stars. People found its shape above Greece and remembered their story. Their tragedy endured because love required trust during impossible darkness. Love carried Orpheus into death, but never controlled death's laws. Music softened monsters, judges, and kings, but never erased consequence. Generations repeated their story whenever love, grief, and trust collided. The lyre bridged two worlds but could not remove choice. Its warning remains. Near the end, doubt becomes most dangerous. Orpheus nearly defeated death, then lost everything through human doubt. Every faithful love song still carries Orpheus toward the light.